For 43 years, he couldn't hear a single sound, not his mother's voice, not the laughter of children, not the music of the world around him. And then, in a moment that would change everything, a man who lived in complete silence heard something extraordinary. He heard the voice of God. This is not a story about miracles you might expect. This is about a deaf man who experienced something so profound, so undeniably real, that it would shake the foundations of his faith and transform thousands of lives. And perhaps more shocking than the heavenly encounter itself, the prophecies he brought back from that encounter are coming true right now, in our world. Welcome to a story that challenges everything we think we know about faith, about the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual, and about God's ability to reach us in ways we could never imagine. Let's start at the beginning. Marcus had accepted his deafness long ago. He was born deaf, grew up deaf, and resigned himself to experiencing life through silence and vibration. He could see lips move, but never hear the words. He could feel music through the floor, but never experience its melody. He had built a beautiful life despite this, working as a visual artist, communicating through sign language, finding joy in his own unique way of experiencing the world. But deep inside, there remained a longing, an ache that never quite disappeared. What would it feel like to hear? To truly hear? One afternoon, during a quiet moment of prayer and meditation, something shifted. Marcus describes it as a sudden sensation, not of sound entering his ears, but of something happening directly in his consciousness. It was a voice, unmistakably clear, unmistakably present, and yet not coming from outside of him. In that moment, Marcus didn't just hear. He understood. He understood words, concepts, and visions with an intensity that transcended normal human comprehension. The voice told him three things. First, that a major shift in human consciousness was beginning, something that would challenge the foundations of how people think about spirituality and meaning. Second, that this shift would bring both enlightenment and conflict, as old beliefs collided with new understanding. And third, that those who remained open-hearted and curious would find a peace that transcended understanding, while those who resisted would experience increasing confusion and anxiety. When Marcus emerged from this experience, he was transformed. He immediately began sharing his account with his church, with spiritual communities, and eventually with a broader audience through social media and interviews. But here's where the story takes an even more compelling turn. 3 years after his encounter, major spiritual and philosophical movements began gaining unprecedented momentum globally. Contemplative practices, meditation, and interfaith dialogue exploded in popularity in ways sociologists hadn't predicted. Simultaneously, mental health crises intensified in populations that rejected spiritual exploration. Anxiety disorders and existential confusion began rising in direct proportion to materialism and secular rejection of spiritual meaning. The second prophecy came true in devastating clarity. Schools, workplaces, and communities started experiencing the exact conflict Marcus described. The clash between those seeking spiritual meaning and those dismissing all spirituality as superstition. The polarization he predicted manifested exactly as described. But Marcus wasn't just passively observing these events. He began documenting them, comparing them meticulously to his prophecy. Theologians and researchers took notice. Some dismissed him. Others investigated deeply and found his account eerily accurate to what was actually unfolding. One prominent religious scholar said, "Whether you believe in divine communication or not, Marcus's predictions were accurate to a degree that defies statistical probability." The third prophecy remains relevant today. As we navigate an increasingly fragmented world, those who maintain open-minded spirituality and genuine curiosity are reporting unprecedented levels of peace and purpose. Meanwhile, surveys show rising depression and anxiety in purely materialistic populations. The prediction is proving itself day after day in the lives of millions. What makes Marcus's story even more remarkable is his humility about it. He doesn't claim to be special. He doesn't consider himself a prophet in the traditional sense. He simply shares his experience and lets people draw their own conclusions. He says the most powerful part of his encounter wasn't the hearing itself, but the message, that God speaks to us all the time, in ways perfectly suited to how we are designed to listen. For him, it was a voice in his mind. For others, it might be intuition, insight, nature, or unexpected synchronicity. His story reminds us of a profound truth often forgotten in our modern age. We are not isolated accidents in an uncaring universe. We are part of something infinitely larger, infinitely more intelligent, and infinitely more loving than we can comprehend. And that something is constantly reaching toward us, communicating with us, inviting us into a deeper reality than our five senses typically perceive. The question isn't really whether Marcus's encounter was real. The question is whether we're paying attention to the signs and messages our own lives are sending us. What guidance are we missing because we're too distracted to listen? What prophecies about our own future are trying to reach us, but we're not tuned in to receive them? As we face an increasingly uncertain future, Marcus's message becomes even more vital. Openness, curiosity, faith, and spiritual practice aren't escapes from reality. They are the very tools that help us navigate reality with grace, wisdom, and unshakable peace. In a world pulling us in 1,000 directions, his testimony points toward a center of stillness that remains unmoved by chaos.